coming up next. Stay tuned to learn more about the state of the art in blockchain and cryptocurrency technology. Reimagine 2020.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reimagine 2020. I'm your host, Adam, with a fantastic and very experienced panel today to drop some knowledge. These are friends of mine in the space. We've known each other now for quite some time, and we're here to share our ideas, thoughts, and opinions, and we'll take it from there. To the audience and viewers, appreciate you tuning in. Our vision for the conference was to give you insight from the very best people with bright minds in the space. You know, our goal is to make sure you walk away with something you never heard before, especially during this talk. Lucky for us, we'll get to hear perspectives from my guests here today, whom I consider industry leaders and professionals in the space for, again, quite some time. They bring extensive knowledge and in-depth experience from their respective fields. Again, thank you both for jumping on. Let's go ahead and talk some shop today. Let's get a quick introduction from Mark and Christian. Christian, if you want to kick it off, give us a little background, and Mark, you can take it after.
Cool. My name is Christian Keroles. I am a multimedia editor and partner at BTC Media, which is one of the media companies in this space. We operate a conference, Bitcoin, the Bitcoin conference, Bitcoin 2019, Bitcoin 2020, next year, Bitcoin 2021. And we operate Bitcoin Magazine, which is one of the top publications for podcasts, news, and just Bitcoin memes in general. And lastly, I in particular run the Let's Talk Bitcoin podcast network, which has 10 extremely high quality Bitcoin podcasts from What Bitcoin Did, Chain Reaction with Delphi Digital, POV Crypto, and many others. Citizen Bitcoin, the list goes on. One-stop shop for fantastic podcasts in the space. In general, I am kind of a pundit as well as just a media editor in all things Bitcoin and crypto.
Thank you for that solid resume. How about yourself, Mark?
Hey, my name's Mark Friedler. I'm CEO of a company called Gigex. We're a consultancy around blockchain, esports, and technology. And specifically in the blockchain space, I ran business development at Swarm Fund for a couple of years. Swarm was the first security token issuance platform and exchange, open exchange platform. I was an advisor to several ICO projects, worked closely with several of these companies on fundraising and go-to-market strategy. I also am the founder of the Crypto Mondays San Francisco meetup. That's the Crypto Mondays is now a global phenom in 55 cities around the world. San Francisco was number 2 after its first city, New York. So I've been running that since January 2018. Feels like forever. In fact, Christian and I, he just told me we met for the first time at one of our early events. So
it was that first event, I think.
At our first event. There we go. Awesome.
So yeah, it goes a long way for sure.
And most recently, I've been running strategy for Anheuser-Busch InBev, AB InBev, the world's largest beer brewer, specifically around enterprise blockchain, where we've been involved in identity, supply chain, international logistics, and media use cases. And the last thing I do is I work with technology companies, helping them figure out what the best strategy is for them to scale their cloud operations. So I work with a company called Bridgepoint. We come in as free consultants, help companies look at what they're doing, how they scale in cloud, and we bring in a variety of good solution providers that then they can talk to and find the best fit for them. So kind of busy doing all those things.
Awesome. And I think all of us have met originally at a meetup here in SF. You know, I met Christian as well. I remember being with you, Christian, on one of your episodes, man. Good podcast over there at POV.
Thank you.
So I put this panel together because, one, everyone involved has been through this blockchain roller coaster together over the last few years, and two, you're highly educated on blockchain and its future potential. For the viewers out there and watchers, listening in, my goal at the end of this conversation is for you to understand what we've all been doing for the last few years, perception versus reality. And so I'm very, happy to have my guests here on board, and we'll go ahead and kick this off. Maybe Christian, what's the purpose of blockchain?
Oh man. All right. Well, I think I have an unpopular opinion here, but
Great.
I don't know what the purpose of the blockchain architecture can do. I don't know all the use cases, and I really can't vouch for any use case except for one in particular, which is the use case of money. So I think that a distributed and decentralized blockchain ledger is fantastic for creating money that no one controls that lives on the internet and ensuring digital scarcity. I think that is something that the world needs. I think it's something that is incredibly powerful. And that is the purpose, and by an order of magnitude, the most important reason why the invention of a blockchain by Satoshi Nakamoto for Bitcoin is so incredibly important. Other things like supply chain, identity, smart contracts, financial derivatives, those kind of things, in my opinion, are just not proven yet. And even if they're widely successful, they would still not be as impactful as Bitcoin and sound money and cryptocurrency.
Makes total sense, and I think for our viewers out there watching this and trying to decipher, like, what is blockchain? Is blockchain Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin blockchain? Kind of having those thoughts and asking those questions. And there are various use cases, right? From, industry to currency. Mark, what's your take on, what's blockchain's purpose? And not so much from a technical standpoint, just the possibilities, the potential. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, I tend to agree with Christian, and I think, those of us who are old enough to remember the early days of the internet, people would be like, what? You're gonna read a newspaper on the internet? What? You're gonna go buy clothing on the internet? What? You're gonna date on the, like, that's just boom, that just makes no sense. And originally, and I'm gonna roll things back a little bit. Like, the internet was around for like 20 years and no one paid attention to it, except, military people, government people, research people. And then the web browser came out, 1994. And then a bunch of guys from Stanford put up a little directory called Yahoo. And the rest kind of happened, right? But, the internet was just a base layer technology. And until the World Wide Web happened, people didn't really grok why they should use it. There was no real scale. And the first use case of the technology platform of the internet was publishing. And so, you think back to the old days of AOL. And there were millions of people using AOL, but AOL was not the internet. AOL worked on top of the internet, and people used this weird thing called email. And it wasn't until enough people were using email that they understood that, wow, there's a need here. I can send a message to somebody and not have a commensurate toll to the distance of that message, which, back in the day, you called, your friend across town, didn't cost anything, but you called your friend across the state or in another state and it got more and more expensive. So that idea of just flattening the cost structure for communication was radical. And the first vertical on top of the platform of the internet was communication, email. Then it became, publishing. Then it became e-commerce. Then it became dating. So there are all these different, silos on top of the platform. So like Christian said, the only real proven business model right now is digital money. That's a great vertical. I believe that there are other really good verticals, such as, the stuff that we've been doing in the enterprise around supply chain, around logistics, international shipping. But for all that to work, you need the elements of a blockchain, which are nodes, which are validators, which are incentives. And frankly, a lot of these things that are being done on a blockchain honestly could be done just in a normal database, right? It's just, it's a sexy thing to do. A lot of people want to do it because it's on the blockchain. But, there are a lot of reasons why use cases where I think a blockchain or in broader terms, distributed ledger could happen, right? So you think about, something like Hashgraph, that's not a blockchain, but, the idea is the same. It's a distributed ledger technology. So, there's that. And then there's the whole idea of letting information run free and letting automation happen and transact freely in a lower cost environment through smart contracts. That's all a great idea. And there's a lot of use cases for that. But at the same time, we haven't really seen a lot of scary shit go down in that yet. I mean, we've seen the DAO, right? We've seen, a parody, a bunch of bad hacks and stuff like that. But we haven't seen something really terrible, like smart contracts, like start a nuclear war or something like that. And at the same time, I think a lot of bigger companies, when they think about this at scale, they're like, okay, that's great. But what if there's a bug in the code? The famous code is law sort of thing. All code has bugs in it. So if code is law, you know what I mean? So yeah. I think there are a lot of things to think about.
In kind of going back, Christian, to what you mentioned on or both of you have mentioned centralization and decentralization. What makes sense, right? I think for Bitcoin, decentralization makes sense. And then on the flip side, and we might be going back and forth on two different topics. We'll try and break this down a little bit further. But we have decentralization in Bitcoin, and then we have centralization operations that work just fine. And now a lot of these enterprises, maybe I'll go back to you, Mark, real quick, on the centralization versus decentralization. And are they integrating blockchain? Are they integrating DLT? Are they just kind of, extension of their legacy system as far as, having control over it? For instance, Corda, Fabric, some of the other ones. What are your thoughts on that?
So some smart person said this to me once, that you have to centralize to decentralize, right? So, and I think we've seen that with a lot of projects, right? You need a critical mass of something working first. And how that happens, I don't think really matters so much. I think the problem with blockchain in general is there are a lot of, true believers that, like, if stuff isn't decentralized 100%, it's not legit. And, I think there's a continuum, right? It takes time to get there. I think the big paradox of blockchain for the enterprise is based on, the widely held belief that, oh, well, I'm the enterprise and I'm holding on to everything in my centralized database. Well, the one thing we know that does not work for security at scale are centralized databases, right? Because they're too attractive and they're all getting hacked. I don't know, how many letters have you gotten in the last year that this credit card's been stolen or that healthcare record's been broken into, right? All of us have gotten tons of alerts that our shit's being stolen all the time. So, centralized security is not the best way to go. Decentralizing security, decentralizing access through, variable layers of encryption that are controlled by user permissions that are not in a single place, I think is a good thing.
So you think there's degrees? There's a spectrum of centralization and then decentralizing certain aspects of it.
So I'll give you what I think is the best use case for an enterprise. Let's say an enterprise can get a benefit to collaborate with competitors. Or, I'm Coke and you're Pepsi. Are you going to trust that Pepsi's data is in Coke's database or vice versa? No. But Coke and Pepsi both need to buy aluminum cans. And this person over here has a supplier of aluminum cans. So if that supplier can have the data available so anyone can onboard them quickly as a supplier, and then they can transact more easily, then that's a good thing. And Coke maybe doesn't know what the purchase price of Pepsi was, and maybe the aluminum can person is able to sell at different prices. So like in that scenario where you have a bunch of potentially competitive actors working in a consortium, potentially for the benefit of everyone, then a decentralized network makes a lot of sense.
And just to tie our viewers back in, we're talking about centralization and decentralization, and we're actually talking about two different applications within blockchain. One, we just got done talking with Mark on the enterprise side, and now maybe we'll get Christian's thoughts on decentralization coming from Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum, maybe other blockchains that you might be familiar about, and kind of maybe giving us some insight on your thoughts on decentralization. As you mentioned, Bitcoin, that's kind of one of the features of it. How else maybe do you see decentralization kind of benefiting us, or what have you thought about decentralization?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, decentralization is extremely important for uh, a blockchain database to have a purpose. A blockchain or distributed ledger or any of these things, for it to be different than a database that one person controls, is it needs to be a database that is controlled collectively by many people. That's what makes it decentralized. There are various degrees of decentralization that people will claim. I think the use case and need for like just unquestionable truth and validity is really like, that is the use case that that makes it so that you need to have more or less decentralization. In Bitcoin's case, Bitcoin is trying to be the ultimate uncensorable, uncorruptible ledger for the world. That is trying to be the most secure, most uncorruptible ledger, and it needs to be completely open and permissionless. So it is open source. Anyone can look at the code. Anyone can download it. Anyone can mess with it. Anyone can participate in validating the rule set and being a part of the Bitcoin ledger. And that enables it to be decentralized. So people, if they're interested in being a part of Bitcoin, they can download the code and participate. And at this point, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are participating in running Bitcoin's code and have a copy of the ledger. They are the blockchain. The people are the blockchain, because all those different people and computers are what holds the Bitcoin ledger in many different places around the world, and ensures that it is redundant and no one actor can compromise the validity of the ledger, because all of those people distributed everywhere have a copy of it.
Yeah.
So,
and one thing I'd say, if you want just a very good, clear, simple explanation, Michael J. Casey now, who runs, CoinDesk, wrote a great book a few years ago called The Truth Machine. The future of, it's like the future of blockchain and everything else. I mean, it's kind of a big blown title, but it's a great book. It kind of in layman's terms describes a lot of things. I think the most important concept is, we've been running under the same way of doing things since the Renaissance, which is dual entry bookkeeping, right? Debits and credits. And we know what happens when a bad actor, cooks the books. The financial crisis a few years ago, banks cooked the books. And in The Truth Machine, he talks about triple entry bookkeeping. That third column, that third ledger, as Christian's talking about, is a publicly available, inspectable ledger that cannot be manipulated in any way. So that's kind of the source of truth, right? So that's liberating, and that takes malfeasance away from a lot of bad actors in financial transactions. At the same time, let's not forget, the reason Bitcoin really works is because there's a big incentive mechanism, which is for the miners, right? There's a mechanism to allow people to do work and get rewarded for their work to create Bitcoin and validate the transactions in the network. And the problem I have with a lot of enterprise applications using blockchain is they're like, oh, we want to use the blockchain, but they kind of give lip service to the whole validation thing, right? So back to your original question, Adam, do you really need a blockchain, or could you do this on a database? Well, if you don't have the concept of validation and incentive, and if I'm running a node and I'm validating networks on a supply chain network, if there's not value in doing that, then why do you need a blockchain? Why not just run a centralized system, right? So I think that's a question that I would put to a provider or a system, like, let me see the architecture of your system, and are the participants incented to do certain actions? And if so, why? How does that whole ecosystem work?
Yeah, no, I think that makes total sense. You brought up a couple good points. as far as the value, right? The incentives, the values for other to care about validating, right? Otherwise, if you don't care, then all right, then we'll just run a system, I'll control it, and you trust me, right? That's kind of the
If I
concept.
could add anything to that too, is like the whole purpose of to distribute a ledger or to have a blockchain is to give up efficiency in order to gain resilience and redundancy. So obviously for Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency, it's vital that it is decentralized, because that's the whole purpose. Like if money was corruptible, then why are you using a cryptocurrency? But, obviously for an enterprise that doesn't want to give access to data or doesn't want to share or cooperate with other enterprises, but they still want to use the blockchain, like Mark said, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, because they are not looking if you're not looking to make your stuff more redundant and more trustless, then you don't need a blockchain.
And to kind of pivot a little bit, what types of projects, and either both of you can answer, it doesn't matter which one goes first. What types of projects are you most excited to see? Not which project specifically, but what kind of concepts are you seeing? I mean, Christian, you have a lot of guests on your podcast, so you see a lot of the trends. You work at BTC Media, you see a lot of the trends. Same thing for you, Mark, even coming from the enterprise side, you're a serial entrepreneur, right, in the startup world. With various projects. What are you guys looking at right now, dating back? We just went through the ICO craze, the crypto winter. We're weeding out projects, infrastructure is being built. Kind of going back to blockchain's purpose. What kind of projects are you guys looking at right now, or seeing, or maybe hope to see? Like, what are we missing here as the space evolves from ICOs to or white papers to ICOs to the bear market where nobody produced anything, right? No code, no product, no MVPs, and then started weeding them out. And now here we are. Now we have like the Coinbases of the world and analysis, like projects looking at transactions and stuff. What are you guys looking at? What types of projects excite you at the moment?
Mark, you want to start?
Sure. I think, let me just say, I think the whole ICO craze was good in a way, in terms of it told the normal person that, just because you don't have a net worth of $1 million, you can still matter, right? So, I mean, I think the whole kind of, qualified investor idea just doesn't make sense. So I think that was a good idea, gave people participation, but it was a horrible outcome, obviously, because there was so much scam and BS. Not only that, all these companies that raised all this money, I'd ask them, okay, 3-4 years later, where's your project? Where's your code? How have these people not produced anything? I mean, I think that's a huge black eye on the entire ecosystem. And I'm kind of shocked that all these projects still haven't shipped anything of value, despite raising millions, or in some cases, billions of dollars.
That's our perspective as well. There's so much money, billions of dollars raised, and what's kind of happened.
Yeah. So in terms of stuff I'm interested in, I'm really interested in DeFi, decentralized finance. I think it makes a ton of sense. Same sort of idea, giving power to individuals to be in charge of their, their financial destiny, and not having a bank in the middle. Alex Mashinsky has spoken, so much about that. I think everything that he says is pretty interesting. That being said, I'm concerned about DeFi because there's so many actors out there doing things that are, technically maybe interesting, but just kind of use case-ish, not really obvious why I need that. And I think the big problem with most DeFi projects is they have no liquidity. And as you know, if you've ever bought or sold a stock, if you buy, a thinly traded stock, and, you buy 10,000 shares and it's like, a penny stock, you're going to move the market. So how can you sell it if there's no market? So you need liquidity for markets to work efficiently. But I think the biggest problem in my mind with blockchain projects is that it's too engineering driven. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think great engineers are amazing people, but a lot of engineers just sit around in a kind of circular firing squad, and they're like, oh, dude, this is so awesome because we're sharding 25 times faster than those guys, and it's like, okay, that's interesting, but like, until blockchain has that AOL moment where your grandma can friggin' send an email without knowing what's going on under the hood, this thing's not going to get broad adoption. And so I've said for a long time, I think the major problem with blockchain is UI UX, right? It's customer experience, making shit so easy to use. And so what I like, DeFi is cool, but what I really like is in the game space. I think there are a lot of use cases there specifically around digital collectibles. And there's one company I was working with for something we were doing at ABI where they were going to create digital assets, put it into an app. In the app, you could interact with the asset in an MR environment. You could take selfies with it and all this sort of thing. But they didn't use MetaMask. They didn't talk about wallets. They totally changed the language to okay, now you have this asset. Here's the value of this asset. You can buy and sell it. But they didn't use geeky terms. So, I mean, I think if we, again, go back to the old days of the internet and think about the mistakes that were made in the early days of the internet. The biggest single mistake of the internet that we're still living with, and Christian feels that pain every day, is CPM. That's a friggin' horrible business model. The advertising cost per thousand was based on how many pages people turned on a dead tree on a newspaper, right? Totally irrelevant to conveying value in a digital world, but we're stuck with that. What's another horrible metaphor? What's that crap you see homeless people pushing around? Oh yeah, shopping carts, right? In e-commerce, it's put your stuff in a shopping cart. No, it's not a shopping cart. It's not a shopping basket. It's buy your thing, those sorts of metaphors and those languages, hold back innovation. So I think in the internet, we could just go on and on of all these terrible
It's like a blockchain wallet, right? Or a crypto wallet.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not actually a wallet.
Yeah. So
there actually are no coins either.
Yeah. So if I'm in a game and I have to figure out, okay, how am I going to, transfer my asset to my wallet and link it to Ethereum? And, it's it's just too complicated. So I think the challenge for anyone doing a project, if you're going to be successful, just make it, take advice from these great mobile app developers, WeChat or Tinder, one swipe, or, just make the UI so simple and hide the whole blah, blah under the hood. Until that gets hidden, no one's going to care. And I think the way we know we're succeeding is that no one talks about blockchain. I'm writing an article now, enterprise blockchains like Fight Club. What's the number one rule about Fight Club?
Don't talk about Fight Club.
Yeah. So I can tell you from my experience, when I went to a senior person in my company and I was showing him a plan where we could leverage a blockchain system in international shipping, and we were shipping $15 billion a year of goods around the world, and we could reduce that shipping time from leaving the facility to getting to the customer. We could reduce that time by 25% by eliminating efficiencies. That would save the company $2 billion. Who wouldn't jump up and down and be like, $2 billion, that's awesome, $2 billion. And that's the way we started. And then I mentioned the word blockchain, and it was just like,
Christian, what kind of projects are you seeing? Again, you see all the trends and you're pretty ingrained in this space. What's sparking your interest? Maybe the ideas that you're seeing floating around.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I have a very different space of interest than Mark. My focus is really on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I think that is right now the most interesting by far use case and only proven use case of a blockchain and distributed ledger. Pretty much everything else seems like marketing. In terms of Bitcoin, today is like the 12th, and the halving just happened yesterday on, or I guess today's the 13th. The halving happened 2 days ago on Monday the 11th, and this is when, in the face of all this macro printing and money printer go burr and all this craziness that's happening in the world, Bitcoin's monetary policy programmatically got more hard and less, and was producing fewer coins. So if you guys want to learn more about the Bitcoin halving and why it's important, just Google Bitcoin halving. There's tons of content out there about it. So, I mean, I think that supply chain, identity, all this stuff, it's like, these are just, this is like table scraps from what really blockchain is going to do, which is revolutionize money, revolutionize trust, revolutionize ownership of value, and the ability to move around the world and be a sovereign person, and to not have any entity tax you of your wealth. And in terms of like killer app for blockchain, we have it. It's called Bitcoin. So whenever anyone says otherwise, I'm just like, you are missing, like, the biggest thing that's ever happened in our lifetime is literally right in front of you, and you're talking about other stuff. So yeah, I mean, that's what I'm focused on. I also think digital dollars extremely interesting. Digital dollars have an obvious use case. The dollar is the world's currency right now. So they are going to have a massive impact as well.
Did you kind of read up on that story where the central banks were thinking about banning stable coins?
Not surprised.
Yeah.
Stable coins are a huge risk to any country that doesn't or can't issue dollars. So that's very interesting.
The other thing. What's the flip side, with the digital dollar and these other fiat currencies going digital? I mean, is that really crypto? Like, what's...
So crypto pretty much means that you can transfer the value using a blockchain without needing a middleman. So you, like right now, if you Square, Cash App, or Venmo, or PayPal, or Visa, like what you're doing is you're saying, hey, Visa, I want to buy this. And then Visa is telling the merchant, yeah, they have the money, they can buy this, right? So you need Visa to affirm or verify that you can actually pay for this thing. And then you have to continuously pay Visa back, all that good stuff, right? Again, same with all of these other apps. It's the same situation. With Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, if I send Adam money and he can just put his phone up and show me a QR code on his screen, and I can just send him money, no matter where we're at, it doesn't matter. He's going to get the money. No one could stop that transaction, and he didn't have to ask anyone's permission. So it's fundamentally different. Digital dollars kind of do that. They do have some sort of censorship ability depending on which organization is creating them.
Aren't we digital now?
Huh?
Aren't we digital now?
Yeah, I mean, but they're not. So there's many different types of a digital dollar, right? But I'm talking about stable coins, digital dollar. Yeah, so these are USDC from Coinbase and Circle, GUSD from Gemini, Tether, USDT from Bitfinex. There are other attempts that don't have, that aren't digitized dollars. They are or tokenized dollars. Rather, there's like DAI, which is Ethereum backed, so cryptocurrency backed dollar. I mean, I think digital dollars plus Bitcoin, that's the story here. That's what blockchain's about.
And since, we were talking about blockchain's, purpose, we are all believers, and there are purposes that we see for many reasons. What are the barriers right now for mass adoption? What's kind of holding us, not us, but what's holding the space back, or is it just time?
So, I mean, I can't comment on Mark's expertise, which is the more enterprise, non-monetary use cases of crypto and blockchain. But in terms of mass adoption, I think we're seeing it. I think it is happening. We are still early in the adoption cycle, but we are definitely in the process of people understanding that fiat currency is something that's a bad thing. And that blockchain can create a product that serves them better, and that's what cryptocurrency and in particular, I think Bitcoin and stable coins do.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think I wanted to get your perspective really on the cryptocurrency side, the Bitcoin side, as far as adoption. And what do you think the critical next steps are to kind of, again, move the needle for the masses? How about this? Does
Aware,
Bitcoin's
I'll tell you, it's awareness and pain. So people being aware of the opportunity and people feeling the pain of government controlled currencies.
how about
Uh,
the
and
price? How about the price
of
Bitcoin?
course, number go up always drives awareness. You guys remember 2017? Everyone and grandma were talking about it. That's when you knew you had to sell. But regardless, like price is the biggest marketing, and Bitcoin is designed to appreciate in value. It's part of the economics that were designed into the system, and other cryptocurrencies steal from its economics and that virality of number go up as well.
Yeah,
So
but
that's going to help.
at the same time, the whole idea of digital gold really took a pummeling in March when, the markets crashed, right? I mean, everyone believed that, Bitcoin's digital gold, it was counter-cyclical to stocks, to all these other things. And, Bitcoin dropped 50% in a day.
Sure.
So I think, look,
I still think it's digital gold. I think that those people are incorrect. And Bitcoin is 9,300 right now. So it's doing well.
yeah, but I mean, at the same time, you talk about markets, you talk about efficiency. Like, let's just be serious here. I mean, the exchanges for the most part are unregulated. A lot of stuff is happening out of Asia. There's tremendous manipulation. There's insider trading. All the shit that is illegal in regulated markets is happening in the crypto market. So, I think it's a big caveat emptor. I love Bitcoin. I want to use Lightning to go buy coffee. It just doesn't make sense, right? Once, something like Lightning or other things allow you to just walk around and just kind of seamlessly take your phone and buy stuff using cryptocurrency that is not, a promise on a dead tree put out by a central bank that we all agree is just, is not the way to go. Then I'm all in. The problem is I'm walking around with, 10 Bitcoin in my pocket, and it was worth $100,000, and then it was worth, 30, then it was worth, $30,000, so a friend of mine's wife was getting paid in Bitcoin, and she thought she was a genius because she was making so much money, until it went from 20 to $3,000. So, and then
Bitcoin is volatile. That's definitely for a reality.
What's your message, Mark? What's your message? What's your message to the viewers on the Bitcoin front? I had asked Christian, what are the So I asked him, and we'll keep it.
Wait, but actually, I do want to kind of talk about a couple of things that Mark brought up. First and foremost, obviously, Bitcoin is volatile, and it's not the same thing as USD. I think we live in a USD world today, and that makes using Bitcoin as a spendable currency difficult. But where Bitcoin is already better than pretty much everything else is, one, you can own it yourself without anyone else. And then two, on a long enough time horizon, you're always in the green. It's like within like 200 days of buying Bitcoin, you on average will be in the green. There are some exceptions if you buy the most extreme top, but there are things you can do to, alleviate that. Dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin alleviates that. There are ways to allocate to Bitcoin that is not as risky and that can give you a lot of upside. So no, it's not good for coffee right now, but not everyone wants it. Not everyone wants it yet. But guess what? When everyone does want Bitcoin, when Bitcoin's price has risen by an order of magnitude, guess what? People will be giving you discounts if you pay with Bitcoin, just like they give you discounts for paying with cash because they don't get charged by Visa or whoever else this convenience fee. And Bitcoin is healthier than cash because it's purely digital. After coronavirus, who's going to want to pay with cash, right? There is a future for digital cash, and Bitcoin is by far the best. And I guarantee you, people will want your Bitcoin when Bitcoin's $1 million a coin, and they're going to be saying, here's a 10% discount if you pay with Bitcoin.
I agree with everything you say on a purely theoretical level. I'm all in. The problem is just kind of on a practical level, right? I mean, we were talking about this before the call.
Bitcoin will practically make you a lot of money.
Yeah, unless you lose your seed phrase, or unless you get, unless
Yes.
you can't find your ledger. I mean, again, it comes down to UI UX, right? I mean, as shitty as banks are, if your card gets stolen, you call some asshole at Bank of America or Citibank, and there's some sort of guarantee mechanism in there, and you get your money back. If you lose your wallet, your seed phrase, you're SOL. I mean, and so that's the thing, that it's still a super hyper early adopter market. And for the market to really work at scale and to have liquidity, the usability has to be there. And so I'm just surprised, I was talking to, Vinny Lingham a few weeks ago, and he's like, oh yeah, our wallet, we have $1 million guarantee, and, you don't have to worry about custody. And if that's really true, yeah, there should be custody-less stuff where you don't have to worry about a bad actor holding the keys. And that's a hard, that's a hard balance to have, right? Yeah, I want to be totally self-custodied, but yeah, I don't want to take all the risk about, this and that. So, I mean, all of us have too many stories of people that have had terrible things happen to them because of, custody challenges.
Totally. And I mean, custody is hard, and the UX around it is terrible. I'll be the first to admit all of that stuff. But with Bitcoin, there's optionality. Like with the US dollar, you don't have option. You either hold cash or it's custodied in a bank. With Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, you can be custodied in a crypto bank, Coinbase, Gemini, Kraken. There's many of them. There's a thriving market of crypto banks of every type, some that will check your identity and some that won't. And you can take custody easily. So for those people who are victims to their government, like 80% of the people in the world, the fact that they can evade their banks and all the regulations and controls that their banks are imposing on them and their money is a massive upside. And it's worth learning how to do it correctly with the poor UX that we have. So, when Bitcoin's $1 million, it will have 10x, 1,000x the UX potential because it'll be worth it. So it's just a matter of price and time.
No, I agree. Look, Bitcoin as a project is immensely successful, and it's in theory impervious to manipulation by any single bank. So yeah, it's great. It's it's AOL mail. That's great. But I mean, I think we need more use cases where right now how many stablecoin projects are there out there?
There's a lot. And I was telling Adam that I think stablecoins are extremely interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. But they're interesting because they're fixing a problem of like you said, of incredible volatility.
What about the central bank? The central banks wanted to ban stablecoins completely. So what do you think about that? Like, what kind of effect is that going to have on the crypto market?
It'll be very difficult for a central bank that's not the United States to effectively ban stablecoins, and stablecoins are bad for everyone except for the United States in terms of their currency, because they effectively allow all citizens to evade draconian currency controls with stablecoins and get access to US dollars, which is highly, highly desired everywhere in the world.
But also Libra, I think, super exciting. We really haven't talked much about that, but I mean, Libra in essence is, an uber central bank, right? The issuer is a mega country called Facebook, with 2 billion citizens. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons for concerns from, sovereign states to have Libra, basically out there acting as like a global central bank. It's interesting, but I think Libra, if Libra works, Libra could be that AOL moment, for crypto. In the same way, you look at, WeChat, and everything, in China is on a QR code. It's like, it all works, right? And so everyone has a WhatsApp or a Facebook or a Messenger account. So if I want to send you $10 and, it's simple and there's no fee, I don't really care what the rails are if it's working. And if Facebook takes a, 1/10 of 1%, on the volume they're going to put Visa and MasterCard out of business. And, that's a great business for them, but you're not going to get away. It's still going to be centralized. I mean, don't kid yourself. Libra is not going to be decentralized.
Wait, what was your opinion on Libra, Christian? Did you have one?
I think Libra is not competing with Bitcoin. There's a very good chance that Facebook will service Bitcoin on their rails. And Libra, just like Mark said, is competing with other payment networks like Visa and MasterCard. And I mean, we saw what happened with Libra wanting to create their own currency. The US government put them in the Senate, drilled them, told them that they can't, and now Libra's bending the knee and they're doing a USD stablecoin. So shows why we need decentralization and why Bitcoin is the way it is.
We got a few minutes left here.
Hey, I'm just wondering, Christian, your hair looks friggin' awesome. You getting a haircut during this log? Like, how's that going down, bro?
Dude, my girlfriend did a really good job, but I was telling Adam, I had a furrow before this and I needed a haircut. So first time, she did a good job.
Looking sharp.
Thank you.
I don't have that much hair, so I don't have to worry about it.
I want to wrap this up. We got a few minutes left in our session. We've talked about a lot of things, actually. We've talked about, from the beginning, what is blockchain's purpose? And this is going back to the viewers and listeners that are trying to understand the space. We got a broad range of demographics right now reaching globally, students and experts and, the middle of the pack. So we just talked about blockchain's purpose. We talked about centralization, decentralization, kind of the pros and cons of that in different aspects, whether that's in enterprise or whether that's in, crypto blockchain. And now it kind of brings us to a point. I'll ask you two questions each. Are you satisfied where we're at today? And how do we, what's the next critical step? What's important to keep this thing moving forward? And this can be from the aspect of adoption. Mark, you can take it either way, from enterprise, or you can take it from the crypto side. Christian, you have more, you're a specialist, right? So what's kind of going on, at this point in 2020, where are we headed in the right direction for one? And then what's the critical next step to maintain that?
I mean, if you look at, mature industries now and look back, the auto industry had hundreds of small manufacturers, in the early days of the car in the 1920s. Everyone talks about the Model T. There were hundreds of manufacturers, and there aren't anymore. There were, Google was like maybe search engine number 25 to market in the internet world. There was Lycos, there was Northern Lights, there was Inktomi, like all these names that no one knows about unless you were around a long time ago. And so I think we're at that stage right now. There's tremendous innovation, there's tremendous excitement. People are trying stuff. You don't need a lot of infrastructure to try stuff. You can, just go to GitHub and grab code and play with it. I think that's amazing. That's great. That's innovative. And I think what's going to show what works is traction. I mean, everyone talked about CryptoKitties, right? And at its peak, there were like 1,500 people using CryptoKitties at any given time, right? And it went down to like, a few dozen. It's like snooze, like compared to any major game out there, it's totally irrelevant. So, I mean, maybe I'm old school because I've been around, I've built a lot of big products, I've worked with major, games and enterprise companies, and I've seen what scale looks like. And I think there's so much cool stuff, but I mean, you have to take it out of the test tube and move it into the real world. And I think the only real measure of that is user adoption and kind of scale growth, right? So, I don't know what that's going to look like, if that's going to be a collectible digital asset for a game, if that's going to be a really cool DeFi app, if that's going to be digital lending. What we were doing at Swarm, I really liked, which was, tokenizing hard assets, letting individual investors own like micro shares of stuff and be able to get, paid on ownership of that. I think that's a great idea. A lot of different people doing that. It hasn't really taken off at scale. So I think the judge is going to be scale.
Cool. I mean, it's kind of a crazy question, like how are we doing, just because it seems like the world is in such a insane state right now.
It might benefit, right, with kind of the stimulus package, kind of going back to those concepts, and what the government has done might benefit maybe.
Sure. I mean, proponents of hard money and Austrian economics and things like that will say, that this is, everything that governments around the world are doing to try to alleviate the problems that coronavirus is creating are just actually making it much worse. And they're destroying our monetary, the tools that we use to maintain our money. the dollar and other assets and stocks and even real estate, it's becoming pretty obvious how manipulated they are, and easily manipulated by governments when a crisis occurs. So I do think that a use case in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is being validated. It's definitely being talked about a lot amongst mainstream media, and I think your grandma and your mom, they've all heard of Bitcoin at this point, and they may have been asking you about Bitcoin, like, what is this Bitcoin thing, whatever. So I think in terms of adoption of cryptocurrency, like, this is the inflection point. This is the time where the world is saying we need to find other kinds of money, and maybe the internet has a solution. Like Mark said, we're going to need a lot more scale before we can actually say that this thing is proven. But there is a lot of positive signs that things like Bitcoin are desperately needed, and guess what? They're here. So hopefully, with time and with education and awareness, the upward trajectory will continue.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing too that Christian said that's totally on point, across digital money, across enterprise, across anything, is basically the compression of costs, right? I mean, the financial industry basically, is like the organized crime families, right? They've all made an agreement that everyone's going to make 2-3% on everything that moves through their system, be it in the credit card, be it in the bank, whatever. So they have a lock on that. So yeah, it's totally game changer that you can now have something being, one fraction of a percentage point to do a micro transaction or any transaction for that matter. That being said, again, kind of to go back to the future, those of you who remember Linux, like when it came out, like Linux, oh my God, we're going to set the OS free. We're not going to be dependent on Microsoft or Apple or any of these people who are, bundling up operating systems and making us buy them. We're going to set Linux free. Then Red Hat came along and said, okay, Linux is great. We're going to put, some basic services and support around it. You don't need to buy Linux from us, but if you want support and services, and we're going to make that kind of safe for the enterprise, right? And so I think that's kind of the thing that blockchain and crypto kind of need, is kind of that layer to make it safe for the enterprise and safe for the individual to use. I don't think that means government regulation per se, but I think that's a big opportunity for companies to come in and be like, hey, we're going to guarantee your custody. You're going to, don't worry about hot wallet, cold wallet. You put your shit here. We're going to manage it for you, and whenever you need it, send a smoke signal, and we'll make it available for you. You don't have to worry about that. But instead of it being like 300 basis points, maybe it's 20 basis points, which is a lot more expensive than it would be if you self-custody. But I'm willing to pay 20 basis points for that security, being able to sleep well. So I think a bunch of those services around all these things really should be of interest.
And I see it evolving, though. So, I think custody is important, like you said, especially for institutions, and it's definitely happening. I could probably name 8 different custody solutions today, and more emerging, just like you said. It's very important.
No, that's been great. I think we're up on time here, but
I'd like to ask Christian. Christian, what's your take? 2 years ago, everyone was issuing their own coin, their own token. What's, in your opinion, the future of the token? As Adam said, you're seeing a lot of things coming up. Of a lot of projects. What is the token dead? The self-issued token by a project, or is there token 3.0 that's going to happen? What are you seeing? What do you think?
Oh man, recently people were doing personal tokens through on Ethereum, which I definitely think is a very dumb idea. I don't know. I don't want to say that there's impossible for a token to have a use case, because I don't actually think that that's confirmed. But right now, pretty much all tokens are bad investments. I think that's a pretty safe thing to say. Obviously, there's not investment advice. So it remains to be proven that an issuer of a token that doesn't have something legitimate behind it, or at least game theory or value behind it, is gonna actually bootstrap. With Bitcoin, there was a long bootstrapping period. Bitcoin is 11 years old. Ethereum also had a significant bootstrapping period. It's 6 years old. Like, these things have public attention put towards them. They have a lot of value stored in them, and there's a lot of game theoretics to back up why you would want those tokens. So just any token being issued, like, it's easy. Like, I can go to a website and issue a token right now, so it can have value. That's what is going to be difficult to make. So people figuring out how to make tokens valuable, I think that remains for some much more creative people than me to figure that out. But I just haven't seen any yet.
That's great. No, that's yeah. I don't know about these tokens. I think there is room. I think there are room for tokens. We just don't know yet how it's going to pan out. I think it's so early on. I think, there was that run up, the last few years. But we'll see what kind of the future holds as this thing continues to evolve and expand. I think there will be some usage, and I think where the tokens might come into play, possibly is through IoT and like devices and cars and machines, right? I think that's where this exchanging of value via token, will rise to the top, and it's going to be quite some time, but I think that's where maybe the token has a place, right, between machine to machine, rather than not.
Why is that different than crypto then? Like, isn't that just a cryptocurrency?
Well,
Bitcoin or Ethereum or USDC.
I think it's programmable money, so I think there's going to be some features and stuff in there that it's going to be tailored. I don't know. That's a good question. I've always thought that too. Why not just use existing tokens out there? But anyways, I think on the machine front, the robots and all that, robots having wallets, there's going to be some aspect of that.
That's going to be for real, though. Yeah. I think the machines using cryptocurrency is going to be huge.
Exactly.
Yeah, and no, you talk about some really interesting stuff, and yeah, it's
it's out there. It's interesting, right? This is just the beginning.
AI that can spend money. Just think about that. That's a little scary.
Well, yeah, I mean, so for me, when I got a friend of mine from way back when in the games days was Brock Pierce, and I'd been in touch, and he kind of got me into it, and got me into the bug, and it reminded me of the first time I kind of latched on to the internet, right? I'm older than you guys, so I was around in like 1994, and being like, oh my God, this changes everything. And you know what? This is something my parents don't know anything about. And, I can be like the king of my domain. So I think that's what's super exciting about crypto and blockchain in general, is like, it's a whole new thing. A lot of super smart, talented, people are young because they've jumped on this right away. They get it. They're native to this. They're not encumbered by the legacy of like, this is the way things are done, which is great. And when I first started, kind of understanding Bitcoin, it kind of felt to me the way the first time I kind of started understanding the internet, like, wow, this could change everything. This is really interesting. I really need to be involved in that. I think that energy and excitement and passion, is what I've experienced, when we run our Crypto Mondays, when we see people come there and have a great time and, learn and want to learn and exchange ideas, that sort of vibrancy of this whole area is super exciting, and I think that in and of itself has a lot of value. This is a creative process, and just because, you end up being, a unicorn or not, doesn't necessarily mean, that's correlated to the value of what you do.
Yeah, I think that sums it all up. We're out of time here. I want to thank you both for jumping on, Mark and Christian. Value your time and appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us here with our audience and viewers. To everybody watching this, we just went through blockchain's purpose, decentralization, centralization, and mainly Bitcoin. So, we appreciate you tuning in and wish you all the best. And thank you for visiting Reimagine 2020. Thank you, folks.
Sure. Thank you, Adam.
Cheers.
Stay tuned to learn more about the state of blockchain education at major universities all around the world. Reimagine 2020.